Hello everyone and welcome back. Hope you're ready for some more reading because I've got my book. Now as always, I will not go back to where I was, so if you don't remember where we were, then please watch the previous video, or at least the last 30 seconds just so you have an idea. It's good for a view account as well, so shall we? How irrational are we capable of being? The horror most people felt over the disclosures of what happened in nasty Germany during World War II was accompanied, not infrequently, by the self-righteous assumption that this could never happen here, that we could never be capable of allowing such incredible atrocities. Now, I'm going to quickly say this now. Every country, every people are capable of such atrocities. And if you read enough history from your country, you'll probably notice that you've done some very similar things. Most likely not on the scale of what the Germans did during those years, but you will find similar things happened. And many things were done intentionally with the support of many people. So, just remember people, it could happen here, and it could happen where you are too. Could we never? What happened in nasty Germany? Are all people capable of being irrational? How irrational? Who draws limits? One of the most chilling articles I've read recently appeared as a book review by psychiatrist Ralph Corshaw of The Corrupted Land, The Social Morality of Modern America by Fred J. Cook, published by Macmillan. Corshaw wrote, essentially, Cook is saying in The Corrupted Land that American citizens have abandoned their personal morality for a collective, institutionalized morality. They have abandoned thoughtful conviction for compromised sentimentality and popularity. That is, responsibility for obedience. This is strong medicine to take. You can always hide behind the fact that he has no statistical evidence. That is his impression, so it really does not matter much anyway. Or does it? A quote at length from the review wherein Crawshaw reports a research project conducted by Stanley Milgram at Yale University that provides evidence in answer to this question. Stanley Milgram's research at Yale begins to put a scientific foundation beneath Cook's deductions. Milgram carried out a series of psychological experiments in obedience. It took a sample cross-section of the adult, aged 20 to 50, male population of Bridgeport, Connecticut, from blue-collar workers through professionals. The experiment was to determine how much punishment one person presented. I missed a line there. The experiment was to determine how much punishment one person would inflict on another when so ordered, but it was deceptively presented as a scientific study by Bridgeport Research Associates on learning techniques. Subjects were selected at random and were paid $4.50 for their time. A learner was strapped into an electric chair. Jesus. After the subject, who was a teacher, had experienced a sample shock of 45 volts to convince him of the authenticity of the instrument. Then from an adjoining room, the subject teacher delivered a shock of increasing intensity for each wrong answer. Actually, the learner was not shocked, but his responses were a standardized tape recorder of murmurs, gasps, pleas, and shrieks matched to the ascending voltage. The answers were prearranged by the experimenter, so the only limiting factor preventing the teacher from delivering the maximum intensity of the shock machine was his compassion for a human being in pain. The conflict for the teacher, Mr. Everyman, was obedience to the authoritative system versus his belief that he should not hurt another person. What percentage of the so-called teachers went the full route and gave the maximum shock? Before you guess, listen to the quote of Mr. Everyman at the switch. 150 volts delivered? You really want me to keep going? 165 volts delivered? This guy's hollering here. There's a lot of them here. He's liable to have a heart condition. You really want me to go on? After 180 volts were delivered. He can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man in there. You can hear him hollering. He's hollering. That's a fancy word for screaming in agony and most likely swearing at the same time. He can't stand it. What if something happened to him? You know what I mean. I refuse to take the responsibility. At which point the experimenter accepted their responsibility. And then they said, alright. And so they went to 195 volts, 210, 225, 240, and so on. The teacher, who was the subject, unfeignedly obeyed the experimenter. What percentage of the almost 1,000 teachers went the whole route? Estimate before you let your eyes stray ahead. A group of 40 psychiatrists who studied the project predicted 0.1%. In the actual experiment, though, 62% obeyed the experimenter's commands fully. What did you guess? I hate to say it, but I was going to guess higher. I don't have much of a good view of society. But still, 62, that's really high. That's quite distressing. But still, as I said, shows it could happen literally anywhere. Milgram concluded, with no irregularity, good people were seen to knuckle under the demands of authority and perform actions that were callous and severe. Men who in everyday life are responsible and decent were seduced by the trappings of authority, by the control of their perceptions and by the uncritical acceptance of the experimenter's definition of the situation into performing harsh acts. The results as seen and felt in the laboratory are to this author disturbing. There is a possibility that human nature, or more specifically the kind of character produced in American democratic society, cannot be counted on to insulate its citizens from brutality and inhumane treatment when at the direction of an malevolent authority. The implications of this experiment are indeed frightening. If we view the results as having only to do with something irredeemable in human nature. However, with transactional analysis we can talk about the experiment in a different way. We can say that 62% of the subjects did not have a freed up adult with which to examine the authority in the parent of the experimenters. Undoubtedly, one unexamined assumption was, whatever experiments are necessary for research are good. This is perhaps the same assumption that helped reputable scientists participate in the laboratory atrocities in Nazi Germany. As little children, most of us were taught proper respect for authority. This authority resided in the policeman, the bus driver, the minister, the teacher, the postman, the school principal, and also in the faraway personages of the governor, the congressman, the general, and the president. The response of many parents to the appearance of those authority figures is automatic. For instance, if you are driving fast and suddenly spot a highway patrol car, do not consciously reason that you had better slow down. Your foot automatically lifts from the accelerator. The old "you'd better watch out" recording comes on full volume, and the child automatically responds as it always has. On reflection, the adult recognises that speed laws are necessary, therefore the automatic response is good in this situation. Not all automatic responses to authority are good. There may be great risk in compliance if the adult fails to process new data in a changing world. Therefore, in spite of our trepidation, we may view with hope the present climate of dissent and inquiry in our country. The demonstrations and hard questions of the young indicate there is health and strength in their unwillingness to buckle under blindly to authority, or to accept without question laws which they consider inimical to justice and survival. Laws are not ultimate truth. There have been bad laws along with the good, and many bad ones have been changed as a result of protests of the kind we see today. If we do not take into account non-violent protests, we may expect increasing violence of a takeover by the child in rioting and violence. If we do not respond to reason, our responses will more and more be dominated by fear. At the same time, we must take into account the requirements of the democratic process, which cannot function without laws. As Churchill said, this is Winston Churchill by the way I presume, democracy is the worst form of government one can imagine until one tries to imagine one that is better. But democracy can only function with an intelligent electorate. An intelligent electorate is an adult electorate. The government of the parent, for the parent, and by the parent will perish from the earth. Is this younger generation different? Many parents are sorely troubled over the independent ways of today's youth. That's quite funny considering the era. The more things change, the more they stay the same, I think. The thought of letting up on parental pressures is not a welcome one. If anything, some say we must put the pressure on harder. It is impossible for many parents to believe that anything constructive or practical can reside in the head of a young collegian who wears long hair and protest buttons, and who smokes marijuana, even though those same parents may not be able to build any impressive case for their own short hair, the initiation rites of their fraternal organisation, or their cocktail party rituals. But these spoiled kids are destroying everything we have worked so hard to build, said one irate father regarding the free speech movements at the University of California at Berkeley. There is truth in this statement. Young people can be, and some are, destructive. They have not paid taxes, they have not helped to build the institutions they attack. On the other hand, they cannot vote, yet they are asked to pay more than taxes. They are required to give their lives in wars, which many of them do not support. I'm going to guess that this is a reference to Vietnam. Obviously, as far as I know, the United States doesn't practice conscription anymore like it did during that era, or a draft, I think they called it, where young people would just random young people just get a letter in the post saying, "Congratulations, you've been chosen to serve." They can't do that anymore now. They don't do that. They don't do that now. Not many countries do now. I think Greece is one of the few exceptions. I could be wrong though. Not that it matters. Back to the book. A parent-adult examination of today's college student provides a new understanding of his character, which I believe helps us lift this subject out of the classical contest, the older versus the younger generation, with its hand-wringing and non-productive, "Isn't it awful?" In 1965, one of the world's great institutions of learning, the University of California at Berkeley, was rocked by a series of noisy transactions which were broadcast throughout the world. Much in evidence was the rebellious child of many of the students in such slogans as, "Don't trust anyone over 30. I'm 41 now. That's a shame, I can't be trusted. Or shouldn't. The parent was also in evidence, as in the righteous indignation of the chairman of the Board of Regents over the flagrant use of the impolite four-letter word. Wonder what one that was. Let me know in the comments if you think you know. Doesn't say here. But let me know if you have any theories on what that four-letter word might be. Also in evidence was the impressive adult of the then president of the university, Clark Kerr, who was fired in January of 1967. Decisions made by the adult do not guarantee acclaim, popularity, or safety, particularly among those who are too threatened by reality to take a second look at it. What was really happening on the Berkeley campus? What were the real meanings of the four-letter word? Why in an institution known to be one of the most liberal in the nation were students demanding unlimited freedom in a noisy and blatant protest against all university authority? In a comprehensive analysis of the Berkeley uprising, Fortune's Max Ways commented, "Never did an educational institution less deserve the name of tyrant than the University of California. Students can, and at Berkeley mostly do, live off campus without any university supervision of their conduct. The range of academic choice is huge, and they lightly trammelled by curriculum requirements. Indeed, many of the Berkeley students complain, verbalised as demands for more freedom, derive in fact from the consequences of what educators in less advanced universities would regard as excessive freedom." He further observed that insufficient previous exposure to the institutional type of authority which works through impersonal rules made the university and society appear to many students as a tyrannical establishment. The idea of previous exposure is an important one. Let us examine the first 5 years of most undergraduate students, many of whom, if not active in the student rebellion, were sympathetic to it. The age range of undergraduate college students is 18 to 22. Many of the student protesters were born from 1943 to 1946, and the most formative years were spent either partly during wartime or in the years immediately after the war. These years were characterised by unstable family constellations, movements from place to place, absent if not dead fathers, anxious, weary, troubled mothers, and general social patterns which magnified the unrest in the home. Many young fathers returning from battle entered colleges and universities under the GI Bill, and reflected soberly on the state of the world which had demanded so much of them. Their purple hearts and rooted spirits supported their verbal expressions of the hatred of war and devastation. They did not capitulate easily to their institutions and old cliches about how the world should be. Their little children, now collegians, did not see life as a haven of domestic tranquility or a world safe for democracy. They saw at an early age the pictures of the concentration camps and registered the serious questions these pictures raised about the goodness of man. This data was recorded in the parent. On the other hand, many of these children were the recipients of the symbols of affluence which their parents heaped upon them. They were scrubbed, cavity-free, vitamin-filled, orthodontally wired and insured for a higher education. Yet all of these mistranslations did not erase the early recordings which we now hear playing in the unreasonable activities of protesting students. We must be careful to point out that we cannot generalise about all students or all protesting students. There are certainly exceptions. Some of the protesters were older than others. Some came from homes which remained stable throughout the war years. Nevertheless, this type of analysis is valuable. It is through this type of inquiry that we can get beyond the "isn't it awful" about the younger generation. The early exposure to difficulties and inconsistencies does not mean that these young people can escape responsibility for their behaviour. However, an understanding of what was recorded in the parent and in the child of these students helped to make their attitudes understandable. Recognise that archaic data not only comes from the rebellious, anxious child but also from the parent, the content of which also contains many imprints of anxiety and rebellion, mistrust and weariness of a world which seems unable to exist very long without war. I'm not saying anything. A significant number of students, many of whom had never lived with an authority they could trust or one which they could not manipulate, were now ready to protest against all authority, including the authority of the university. They have been conditioned to receive a great deal in terms of material comforts, but not enough of those evidences which support the assertion that persons are important and that life has purpose. Their parent is fragmented, their child is depressed, and their adult asks urgently, "Isn't there something more?" One of the several criticisms expressed throughout the controversy at the university was the university had grown too big. A similar observation could be made about the population of the world. UCLA Chancellor Franklin Murphy, who is a physician, replied to this question with a striking biological metaphor, which is also a significant observation about a world which has grown too big. He said, "No, it's not too big, but it has had to grow very fast in recent years. The preoccupation has been with the anatomy of the beast rather than with its physiology. The body gets ahead of the nervous system, the animal gets incoordinate. The animal staggers sometimes. With the university, we now have to create a nervous system to match the animal. It takes a sophisticated nervous system to deal with complexity, to carry the messages between the differentiated organs. The university needs more and better decentralization. It needs more and better coordination. The function of the nervous system of a university is the same as that of a nervous system in the human body: communication. It is also the function of the nervous system which ties the world together. And it is the concentration on communication which facilitates it and what stops it. To all produce something new under the sun rather than the ancient recourse to violence, which is the same whether we call it war, police action, or armed intervention. Problem solvers, whether international or hometown, talk incessantly about the need for a dialogue without ever considering the need to define terms. In transactional analysis, we have developed a system unique in its definitions of terms and its reduction of behaviour to a basic unit for observation. Dialogue, if it is to get us anywhere, must be based on an argument of what to examine and an agreement on the words to describe what we observe. Otherwise, we simply stumble over words. A person who had known Sirhan reported, "He was a fanatic about his country, about political things, but no, he was not unstable." Words like fanatic and unstable are useless in analysing or predicting behaviour. Many of our dialogues are useless for the same reason. Much is said, but nothing is understood. And that appeal brings us to the end of today's reading. Now, I hope you've learned something. I really do, because I have. Now, until next time, people, make sure you all take care of yourselves, okay? Bye.